Commander Vexthar walked through the docking bay of the neutral station with the weight of his many victories on his shoulders. His crystalline body caught the light, throwing rainbows across the metal walls. Every scar on his exoskeleton told a story of war and conquest. He had lived for 200 years, and in that time, he had fought in 17 different wars. The Krell species did not lose wars. That was a fact as certain as the rotation of stars. The Krell were built for combat. Their bodies were hard as metal. Their reflexes were faster than most species could even perceive. Their minds worked through military problems the way water flowed downhill, always finding the path of least resistance and greatest advantage. The Coalition military academies taught Krell tactics, Krell strategy, and Krell philosophy to young soldiers across the galaxy. To be Krell was to be born a warrior. Today, Vexthar was here to meet with the humans. He had heard reports about this new species that had recently joined the larger galactic community. The reports were not impressive. Humans were soft. They had no natural armor. They could not regenerate from wounds like the Sarth could. They did not have the telepathic abilities of the Vexcali. They were physically weak compared to most of the galaxy's major species. Vexthar had read the human biology reports with something close to amusement. These creatures bled when cut. They needed to breathe specific gases. They became tired and needed to sleep for long periods. They got sick from pathogens that would not affect stronger species. And yet, somehow, they had managed to build a functioning spacecraft and navigate the void between stars. That was almost impressive for such fragile creatures. The docking bay doors opened, and Captain Lisa Morrison walked toward him. She was small. Her skin was smooth and lacked any kind of protective coating. Her two arms looked thin and weak. Her two legs moved in a way that seemed inefficient to Vexthar. Everything about her screamed fragility. Behind her came 8 more humans. They wore matching uniforms that marked them as military officers. Vexthar recognized the insignia from his briefing materials. These were the crew of the human flagship, the HM's Pathfinder. They were supposed to represent the best that humanity had to offer. Lisa came to a stop in front of Vexthar and extended her hand. Vexthar knew this gesture from his cultural briefing. It was how humans showed peaceful intent. He reached out with one of his lower appendages and made contact with her palm. Her grip was warm and firm. Vexthar noted this. At least the humans had some strength in them, even if it was minimal. "Commander Vexthar," Lisa said, her voice steady and clear. "Welcome to the HM's Pathfinder. We are honored that the Krell have agreed to meet with us. The Coalition required an assessment of your military capacity," Vexthar replied. His voice was a series of clicks and grinding sounds that the translation device converted into clear human speech. "I am here to conduct that assessment." Lisa smiled. Vexthar still could not fully interpret human facial expressions, even with his advanced training. The smile seemed to indicate pleasure or confidence. He made note of it. The human captain led him through the corridors of her ship. Vexthar observed everything. The corridors were clean and well-maintained. The crew moved with purpose. There was order here, which was good. Disorder led to defeats. But the crew also seemed to watch them as they walked. Some had their hands near weapons. They were nervous in his presence. That was sensible. The Krell could kill most of them with minimal effort. Lisa brought him to a conference room and activated a large display screen. "I thought you might want to review some of our recent military operations," she said, "to give you a sense of our capabilities." Vexthar settled himself and began to review the data. The first file showed a battle between the human frigate Endeavor and a swarm of insectoid creatures called the Verdun. The Verdun were known to the Krell. They were numerous, but not particularly sophisticated in their tactics. The Krell had defeated them twice, with acceptable casualty rates, But as Vexter reviewed the human engagement, something made him pause. The Endeavor had been facing a force of Verdun that was twice the size of the Krell fleets that had fought them. And the human ship had held them off for 18 hours. 18 hours. Vexter scrolled through the battle record more carefully. The human ship's shields had failed after 6 hours. After 6 hours, the Endeavor had been taking direct hits from Verdun weapons. The damage reports were extensive. Systems were failing one after another. The crew was suffering casualties, and yet the ship had kept fighting. Vexter looked up from the display. "Your crew remained aboard this ship even after the shields failed," he said. It was not a question. Lisa nodded slowly. Captain Kenneth Hayes ordered the crew to stay at their stations. He knew that if the Endeavor retreated, the Verdun would break through our defensive line. "And what lay behind your defensive line?" Vexter asked. "A colony," Lisa said. 3 million people. 1 million of them were children. The words hung in the air between them. Vexter's mind worked through the calculation. Kenneth Hayes, the captain of the Endeavor, had kept his ship in a battle he could not win because there were children on a colony world behind his position. He had not retreated. He had not abandoned his crew to save his own life. He had chosen to sacrifice. Vexter looked back at the casualty report. 43 crew members had died on the Endeavor during that 18-hour engagement. Out of 218 crew members, 43 had not made it home. The ship had survived, but at great cost. How many of the crew volunteered for this mission? Vexter asked. "All of them," Lisa said. The Endeavor was the only ship we had in position to defend that colony. Kenneth put out a call for volunteers to stay with him. Every single member of his crew volunteered. Vexter made a low grinding sound. Among the Crow, such a thing would not happen. Soldiers would not volunteer to die. They would fulfill their duty if ordered, but they would not do so voluntarily. They did not want to die. No species truly wanted to die, but the humans had chosen to stay. They had known what would happen if they remained. They had known many of them would not survive. And they had done it anyway, not for conquest or resources, but for people they had never met. For children who lived on a world they had never visited. "I want to meet the survivors of the Endeavor," Vexter said. "I want to understand how humans can do such things." Lisa looked surprised. "That is an unusual request, Commander." "Your species interests me," Vexter said. And it was true. For the first time in centuries, the Krell commander had encountered something he did not understand. And that made the humans more dangerous than any enemy he had ever faced. The weeks following Vexter's initial meeting with Captain Lisa Morrison were filled with constant requests. He wanted to review more battle records. He wanted to study human military doctrine. He wanted to understand the structure of human military commands and the way humans organized their forces. His behavior confused his fellow Krell officers on the Coalition Council. Commander Vexner, a Krell of considerable rank and experience, brought up the matter in a private message to Vexter. "You spend an excessive amount of time studying these fragile creatures," Vexner wrote. "The humans have minimal military capacity compared to the true powers of the galaxy. Why do you waste your attention on them?" Vexter did not respond to the message for 2 days. He was too busy reviewing data. There was something in the human military records that demanded his attention. The more he studied the battles, the more the pattern became clear. In every single engagement where humans were present, their allies had higher survival rates. When humans fought alongside other species, those allied forces performed better than normal. The humans were making their allies stronger. After his analysis was complete, Vexter sent Lisa a message requesting to visit the HMS Pathfinder again. This time, he wanted to tour the ship and observe the crew in their daily operations. Lisa agreed, and Vexter arrived at the docking bay on a clear afternoon. Local station time. Lisa met him personally and led him through the corridors of her ship. As they walked, Vexter observed the crew members they passed. When they saw the Krell commander, many of them straightened their uniforms and stood taller. Some attempted to look brave. Others simply nodded with respect. There was no fear in their eyes, which surprised Vexter. Most beings showed fear around the Krell. Humans seemed to show something else. They showed recognition. "Your crew is not afraid of me," Vexter stated. "No," Lisa agreed. "They have seen worse things than a Krell commander. They have looked death in the face." She took him to the medical bay, where the chief medical officer was reviewing patient records. His name was Robert King, and he had served on the Endeavor during that brutal 18-hour battle. Vexter noted that King's hands moved with the confidence of someone who had performed his duties under extreme pressure and had survived. "Dr. King," Vexter said, "I have a question that troubles my analysis of human military effectiveness. How do humans maintain psychological stability during extended combat when they are aware that they lack the physical advantages of other species?" Robert paused from his work and looked up at the alien commander. It was an unusual question, but Robert had learned that aliens often asked unusual questions. He set down his work and gave the matter serious thought before answering. "We do not believe we lack advantages," Robert said finally. "We believe we have advantages that others do not recognize. When a human knows that others are depending on them, something changes inside us. We become stronger than logic says we should be. We push through pain and fear because stopping means others will suffer." Vexter processed this information. That is an emotional response. Emotions cloud judgment. Sometimes, Robert agreed. But emotions also give us reasons to fight when reason alone would tell us to retreat. A human will charge into death if it means protecting the people next to them. That makes us unpredictable in ways that most military strategists do not account for. Vexter was quiet for a moment. Then he asked about the Endeavor again. "The 18-hour engagement. Your ship was damaged beyond functional repair. The logical choice would have been evacuation. Why did Captain Hayes order the crew to remain at their stations?" Robert's expression hardened. His jaw tightened. This was clearly a painful memory for him, because 3 million people would have died if we left. Kenneth knew that. We all knew that. He gave us the choice to evacuate if we wanted to. Everyone who could evacuate refused. We stayed because Kenneth stayed. And Captain Hayes? Vexter asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "He died on the bridge," Robert said quietly. "When the final explosion happened, he was still there. He made sure everyone else got to the evacuation pods before he allowed himself to leave. He did not leave in time." Vexter made no sound. He simply processed this information. Kenneth Hayes had deliberately stayed on a dying ship to ensure that his crew escaped. He had known this decision would kill him, and he had made it anyway. For his crew, for the people below on that colony, "I would like to meet with the survivors of the Endeavor," Vexter said. "All of them." Lisa arranged a meeting for the following day. In a conference room aboard the HM's Pathfinder, Vexter found himself sitting across from 6 human officers who had survived the 18-hour battle. They included the tactical officer who had lost an arm, a junior ensign named Grace Sullivan, an engineer named Marcus Foster, a communications officer named Diana Wells, a navigator named Christopher Davis, and a security officer named Anthony Cooper. They sat in silence for a moment. Vexter's compound eyes studied each of them carefully. He was looking for signs of psychological damage or instability. What he found instead was calm. These humans had suffered terrible trauma, and they were calm about it. "Why did you not request transfer to other commands after the battle?" Vexter asked directly. There was no point in softness. These were warriors. They would not respect delicate language. Marcus Foster, the engineer, spoke first. The Endeavor is our home. The people who died there died because they believed in what we were doing. Walking away would dishonor them. My friends died there, Grace Sullivan said, her young voice steady. People I had known since the academy. If I left, I would be betraying their memory. One by one, they gave their reasons. None of them mentioned fear of military punishment or career concerns. They spoke only of loyalty to their fallen crew members and to each other. They spoke of Captain Kenneth Hayes with reverence. They spoke of duty and honor and sacrifice. By the time the meeting ended, Vexter had reviewed over 3 hours of testimony. He had asked question after question, trying to understand the mechanism that kept humans fighting when they should have been broken by their losses. As he prepared to leave, he turned to the group and asked one final question. If you had to do it again, knowing the cost, would you make the same choice? Every single one of them said yes without hesitation. Vexter left the HM's Pathfinder with his mind troubled. Among the crew, choices were made based on logic and probability. You calculated the cost of victory and weighed it against the benefits. If the cost was too high, you did not pay it. But humans seemed to operate under a different calculus entirely. They made decisions based on loyalty and love and commitment to others. These forces were not logical, but they were powerful. They made humans willing to die for each other. They made humans strong in ways that superior weapons and armor could not match. For the first time in his 200-year military career, Commander Vexter began to wonder if the Krell truly understood what strength was. Vexter requested to visit the Endeavor herself. The ship was still undergoing repairs in the orbital shipyard, but Lisa arranged special access for the Krell commander. As Vexter walked through the damaged corridors, he saw the true cost of that 18-hour battle. Hull breaches had been sealed with emergency plating. Entire sections of the ship remained dark and inactive, their systems too damaged to restore. In the tactical station, he could see the scorch marks where an explosion had taken the arm of Kevin Porter. In the communications center, he saw the bulkhead where Diana Wells had been trapped for 3 hours during a reactor coolant leak, communicating with her team while fire burned around her. The bridge was the worst. The command chair, where Kenneth Hayes had spent those final hours, was shattered. The display screens had exploded. The walls were blackened with soot and scorching. This was where the human captain had made his choice. This was where he had chosen to die. Vexter stood in that ruined command center for a long time. His analytical mind tried to calculate the probability of the decisions that had been made here. Captain Hayes had roughly 0 chance of surviving those final hours. His crew had roughly 43% chance of not returning home. He had chosen those odds anyway. He had chosen them to protect 3 million people he would never meet. A human voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Kevin Porter, the tactical officer who had lost his arm. He was moving through the ship on some kind of official inspection, and he saw Vexter standing on the bridge. "Commander," Kevin said, "I did not expect to see you here. I am attempting to understand the decisions made on this bridge," Vexter replied. "I am having difficulty with the mathematics." Kevin walked to the damaged command chair and placed his remaining hand on it. "There is no mathematics that explains what happened here. Captain Hayes made a choice that could not be calculated. He saw 3 million people who needed protection, and he decided he would provide that protection, no matter what it cost him. Even though it cost him his life," Vexter said. "Especially because it cost him his life," Kevin corrected. "If the cost had been low, the choice would have been easy. Anyone would have made it. But Kenneth chose to pay the highest price possible. That is what made it matter." Vexter turned to face the human officer fully. "You have lost your dominant arm. Your ability to perform your duties has been significantly reduced. Yet you have requested to return to the Endeavor rather than transferring to a desk position. This does not align with logical self-preservation." Kevin looked down at his missing arm. There was no sadness in his expression. There was no regret. "I can still do my job," he said, "and my crew needs me. That is what matters." Over the following weeks, Vexter spent considerable time aboard the Endeavor, speaking with crew members and observing the repair process. He spoke with Marcus Foster, the chief engineer, who described the moment when critical systems began to fail. Marcus had been in the engine room when a verdant weapon had burned through the hull nearby. Rather than flee to safety, Marcus had remained at his station, making sure the engines could still provide power for the weapon systems. "We were losing," Marcus said plainly. "Everyone on that ship knew we were losing. But we kept fighting anyway because Captain Hayes was fighting, and we would not abandon him." Vexter spoke with Diana Wells, the communications officer, who had maintained contact with the colony below even when her own communications center was burning around her. "I could hear them," Diana said, remembering the voices of the colonists. Children asking their parents if we were winning. Families huddled together. And I knew that if we stopped fighting, all those people would die. So we did not stop. He spoke with Christopher Davis, the navigator who had guided the damaged ship through the enemy formations, with precision and skill despite systems that were failing around him. Christopher had been injured twice during the battle, but had refused to leave his station until a backup navigation officer could arrive. 17 people died in the tactical section, Christopher said. 17. I had known some of them for years. But I had to keep doing my job, because if I did not, the ship would crash into an asteroid field, and everyone would die. You keep doing your duty because that is the only thing you can still control. Finally, Vexter asked to meet with one final person. He requested a meeting with Catherine Hayes, the widow of Captain Kenneth Hayes. They met in a small private chamber on the space station. Catherine was a woman of about 60 years old. Her hair was gray, and her eyes held the deep sadness of someone who had lost everything. But when she spoke, her voice was strong and clear. "My husband made his choice," Catherine said. "He knew what would happen if he stayed. He told me before the battle that if things went badly, he would not abandon his crew. I understood what that meant. I had married a man who believed that duty meant something. That honor meant something. Do you regret the choice he made?" Vexter asked. Catherine was silent for a long moment. Tears came to her eyes, but they did not stop her from speaking. "I regret that he is gone, but I do not regret who he was. I do not regret that he died doing what he believed was right. Kenneth saved 3 million people. One of those people was a child named Emma. She is 7 years old. Because my husband stayed on that bridge, Emma gets to grow up. She gets to live. That is worth the cost." Vexter made no response. He simply listened as Catherine described her husband. She spoke of his childhood. She spoke of how they had met. She spoke of the way he had cared for his crew. She spoke of his dreams and his fears, and his hopes for the future. By the time the meeting ended, Vexter understood something that no amount of data analysis had been able to teach him. Kenneth Hayes had not been a soldier making a calculated military decision. He had been a man who loved his crew and loved the people he had sworn to protect. That love had been the reason he had chosen to stay. That love had been the reason his crew had chosen to stay with him. Love was not a weakness among humans. Love was their greatest strength. Vexter left the space station and returned to his command vessel. As he sat in his private quarters, he stared at the data files that contained every record of the Endeavor's final battle. He had come to the Krell space to prove that humans were inferior soldiers. Instead, he had learned that humans were warriors in a way that the Krell had forgotten how to be. The Krell won battles through superior tactics and strength. Humans won battles through something deeper. They won battles because they were willing to die for each other. And that made them dangerous in a way that armor and weapons could never match. Vexter did not return to the Coalition Council immediately. Instead, he spent 3 months conducting a comprehensive analysis of every military engagement in galactic history that had involved human participation. He studied the Veranda conflict. He studied human defensive actions against the Sasti raiders. He studied human relief operations when the Sarath had collapsed due to biological plague. He studied human reactions to every scenario where they had been forced to choose between self-interest and duty to others. The pattern was always the same. When humans were present in a military conflict, outcomes were better for civilian populations. When humans were leading forces, lower-ranked soldiers and allied species showed higher morale and better performance. When humans were defending something, they fought with an intensity that seemed to exceed what their physical capabilities should allow. By the time Vexter finally returned to present his findings to the Coalition Council, he had rewritten his entire understanding of human military capacity. The council chamber was vast, with representatives from 12 different species seated in tiered rows. The Krell held the highest positions. Humans held the lowest, as was appropriate for a developing species. But Vexter would change that calculation before the day was done. He began his presentation without preamble. I have conducted an exhaustive study of human military performance across the past 5 years. I will now present my findings. The presentation was devastating to conventional wisdom. Vexter showed how human-led operations had a 73% higher success rate than operations led by other species of similar technological capability. He showed how human defensive positions held 42% longer than standard military theory predicted. He showed how human pilots, despite flying inferior spacecraft, had 0 recorded instances of abandoning their wingmates. Then he showed the Endeavor's final hours, frame by frame, shot by shot, casualty by casualty. The Council watched in silence as humans died at their posts. The Council watched as Kenneth Hayes ordered the final evacuation. The Council watched as the captain remained on his bridge, making sure his crew escaped, knowing that his ship would be destroyed with him still aboard. When the presentation ended, Vexter stood before the Council and made his conclusions clear. Humans are not warriors because they are strong, he said. They are warriors because they are loyal. They are fighters because they love. They will sacrifice themselves for their crew and for the people they are sworn to protect. This makes them unpredictable in ways that our conventional military doctrine does not account for. A Sarath representative made a sound of dismissal. They are simply poorly trained. They make emotional decisions when they should make logical ones. No, Vexter said flatly. That is your error. You assume that loyalty and love are weaknesses. You assume that a human should retreat when logic says retreat is logical. But humans do not retreat because their loyalty makes retreat impossible. Their commitment to others becomes more important than their own survival. This is not a weakness. This is their greatest strength. A Vex-Cali representative spoke next. You are suggesting that we should base military doctrine on emotion? On loyalty? These things cannot be measured or predicted. Precisely, Vexter replied. You cannot measure them, so you cannot predict human behavior. A human can be pushed further than you think is possible. A human can endure more pain than their biology should allow. A human will fight harder to protect others than they will fight to protect themselves. When you do not know the limits of an opponent, you are at a disadvantage. When an opponent is willing to die for their crew, you cannot defeat them with weapons alone. The council chamber erupted in argument. Some species agreed with Vexter. Some vehemently disagreed. Some thought he had gone soft in his old age. Some called for his removal from the council. But then Lisa Morrison stood. She had been observing from the human section, the lowest tier of the council. She stood up and walked to the center of the chamber. No human had ever done this before. Protocol demanded that lower species remain in their assigned areas. The guards moved to stop her, but Vexter made a gesture and they stepped back. Lisa looked directly at the assembly. Her voice was steady and clear. Commander Vexter is correct. Humans are warriors because we love. We are willing to die for each other because we believe that life without loyalty and honor is not worth living. My captain, Kenneth Hayes, died on the bridge of his ship because he believed that duty meant something. And that belief, that commitment to something beyond himself, is what made him strong. Lisa looked around the council chamber at the various alien species. You see humans as fragile because we do not have your armor or your strength or your weapons. But you are missing what makes us dangerous. We do not fight because we are programmed to fight. We do not fight because it is logical. We fight because the people next to us matter more to us than our own lives. That is what Kenneth Hayes proved in those 18 hours. That is what he will keep proving as long as humanity exists. She returned to her seat, but the impact of her words hung in the air. That night, Vexter received a message from the other Krell commanders. They were calling for a meeting. They wanted to discuss his apparent compromise of Krell military philosophy. They wanted to discuss whether he had been exposed to some kind of human cognitive infection that was affecting his judgment. Vexter responded with a personal message to Commander Vexnor, the one who had questioned his focus on humans months earlier. I understand your concerns, Vexter wrote. You believe I have been influenced by human thinking. You are partially correct. I have been influenced, but not by the weakness you fear. I have been influenced by strength. I have watched humans die for each other. I have learned that the strength I have pursued my entire life, the strength of armor and weapons and tactical advantage, is incomplete. He paused before continuing his message. Kenneth Hayes died on a bridge so that 3 million strangers could live. He did this not because he was programmed to do it. He did it because he chose to do it. Because love for his crew and duty to innocence was more important than his own life. That is a strength that no amount of technology or speed or armor can replicate. The message was controversial. It was discussed in every Krell command center in the sector. Some agreed with Vexter. Some did not. But the message accomplished what it was intended to accomplish. It forced the Krell to confront a truth that they had been avoiding. Humans were not inferior. Humans were different. They fought with a kind of strength that the Krell had largely abandoned over their centuries of dominance. And that difference made them worth respecting. Over the following weeks, Vexter worked with Lisa Morrison to draft new protocols for human-Krell military cooperation. The changes were significant. Humans would no longer hold positions only at the lowest levels of the military hierarchy. Human commanders would be given authority equal to Krell commanders in joint operations. Human military philosophy would be studied alongside Krell doctrine in the academies. It was unprecedented. It was revolutionary. And Vexter knew that it was necessary. The Krell had conquered most of their enemies through superior force. But they could not defeat humans that way. Humans could only be understood, respected, and allied with. Because humans fought for something beyond themselves. And that made them the most dangerous warriors in the entire galaxy. A year had passed since Vexter's first meeting with Captain Lisa Morrison. The coalition military structure had transformed in that time. The changes had not come without resistance. Conservative factions within the Krell command structure had fought hard against the elevation of human military status. But the evidence was undeniable. In joint operations, where humans and Krell commanded together, mission success rates improved by 32%. In defensive positions where humans were present, casualty rates for all allied forces decreased significantly. The mathematics had finally caught up to the Reality that Vexter had discovered months earlier. Humans were not the weak creatures that the galaxy had assumed them to be. The Coalition Council convened on a full moon cycle to formally acknowledge the changes to the military hierarchy. This was not a simple administrative adjustment. This was a restructuring that acknowledged that humans had equal standing with the Krell in matters of military command and strategy. Vexter stood before the assembled council, representatives from 23 different species. He had prepared his remarks carefully. These words would be recorded in the official history of the Galactic Coalition. What he said today would be remembered and studied for generations. 200 years ago, I made my first kill in combat, Vexter began. I was young then, barely past my first century of life. I was strong and fast and confident in my abilities. The enemy fell before me. Since that day, I have fought in 17 wars. I have led thousands of warriors into battle. I have never retreated from a conflict. I have never abandoned my people. And I have always believed that this made me strong. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Then I met the humans. I met Captain Kenneth Hayes, whom I never had the opportunity to face in battle. Yet he taught me something that all my victories had not taught me. He taught me what true strength looks like. The council was utterly silent. No Krell commander had ever spoken like this before. Vexter continued. Captain Hayes died on the bridge of his ship to save 3 million people he had never met. His crew remained with him in that death trap because they understood that duty meant something. They understood that loyalty meant something. They chose to stay at their posts knowing that the chance of survival was minimal. This is not the action of a weak being. This is the action of a warrior in the truest sense. He displayed an image of Kenneth Hayes on the massive screen behind him. The human captain looked back at the council with calm, resolute eyes. This is the face of strength that we have been unable to recognize. We have strength of body. We have strength of technology. We have strength of numbers. But we do not have this strength. This is the strength to choose duty over survival. This is the strength to choose your crew over yourself. This is the strength to sacrifice everything for innocents who are not your own. Another image appeared. 43 human faces. The crew members who had died on the Endeavor. Young faces and old faces. Faces of beings who had known they were going to die and had gone to their deaths anyway. Each of these individuals made a choice in the 18 hours before their death. They could have demanded to be evacuated. They could have abandoned their posts and fled. The captain would not have punished them. Many of them had families waiting for them on colonies throughout this sector. But they chose to stay. They chose to die. And they chose this because they believed in something bigger than themselves. Vexter stepped down from the speaking platform and walked directly to where the human representatives sat in their lowest tier of the council chamber. He reached down and took Lisa Morrison's hand. It was a gesture of absolute equality. Humanity has proven itself to be something more than a developing species, Vexter declared. Humanity has proven itself to be warriors of honor and courage and strength. I am proud to serve alongside them. I am honored to fight beside them. And I am respectfully asking this council to formally acknowledge their equal standing in the military hierarchy of the Galactic Coalition. The vote was not unanimous. Conservative voices still argued that the humans were not yet ready for such responsibility. But the vote passed with a clear majority. Humanity was elevated from their lowest position to a position of equality with the other major powers. As the council session ended, Lisa approached Vexter. They stood alone in the vast chamber, the alien commander and the human captain who had started this revolution in thinking. "Thank you," Lisa said. "Kenneth would have been proud of you." Vexter made a low sound, something between a hum and a whistle. "I have spent my entire life believing that I understood strength. I have spent 200 years believing that the Krell represented the pinnacle of military excellence. But your species has taught me that I was incomplete in my understanding. You do not become strong through armor and weapons. You become strong by loving those around you so much that their survival becomes more important than your own. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of sincere respect. I have fought against many enemies, Captain Morrison. I have conquered many worlds. But I have never fought alongside warriors like yours. And I have come to understand that a galaxy protected by humans is safer than a galaxy protected only by the Krell. Not because you are stronger, but because you are willing to die for people who are not your own. Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes. We're going to work well together, Commander. Over the following months, the partnership between the Krell and humanity deepened. Joint training operations produced warriors who combined Krell discipline and strength with human adaptability and compassion. The rest of the galaxy began to take notice. Species that had long chafed under Krell dominance began to look to humans as an alternative power structure, a counterbalance to Krell authority. Some Krell commanders resented this development, but Vexter saw it as necessary evolution. The Krell had been dominant because they were strong. But the galaxy did not just need strength. It needed something else. It needed honor. It needed warriors who would sacrifice themselves for others. It needed the human touch. A year and a half after the council vote, Vexter received a personal message from the Krell High Command. They wanted him to return to Krell space to train the next generation of military officers. They wanted him to teach the new philosophy of warfare that incorporated human values alongside Krell tactical excellence before he left the human space station, where he had spent so much time. Vexter met with Lisa one final time. They sat in her office aboard the HM's Pathfinder, looking out at the stars. I came to your world believing your species was inferior, Vexter said. I leave it believing your species might be superior in ways that matter most. We're just people, Lisa said. We make mistakes. We have flaws. So do we, Vexter replied. But we have forgotten something that humans remember. We have forgotten how to love. We have forgotten how to sacrifice. We have forgotten that strength without compassion is only power. Kenneth Hayes showed me that true strength is the willingness to die so that others might live. That is a lesson that your species teaches the galaxy whether we want to learn it or not. As Vexter's ship departed from the human station, he sent one final message to Lisa Morrison. It was brief, but it carried the weight of a lifetime's perspective overturned in months of understanding. You have changed what I believed about strength, the message read. You have made me understand that the greatest warriors are those who would sacrifice everything for those they love. The galaxy is fortunate to have humans defending it. Long live the human spirit of sacrifice and honor. And in that moment, the galaxy's understanding of strength was forever altered. The age of Krell dominance was not ending, but it was being balanced by the presence of a species that fought not for conquest, but for the protection of the innocent. And that made all the difference in how the future would unfold.